We're joined now by Loomer, who's been doing some excellent journalism related to Kamala Harris and the corruption of the legal system in California. Laura, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
I've been missing you on Twitter. You've been a little bit shyer on there, so I had to get you on here today. But we hope the tweets, more frequent tweets, will be coming back for you soon, even though you're still on there.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not by my choice, but I miss Twitter as well.
Yes, Laura, I am mentioning you can find her at the Rebel Media. Not that that's any relation to her not being there on Twitter or something. But anyhow, let's get to this story, which was very well produced, and I recommend that people look up at the Rebel Media about what happened in California involving Islamophobia, whatever. Maybe you could take us from the beginning. We do have enough time here. I'm leaving 20 minutes for you on this segment.
So, last year, a man by the name of Mark Fagan was arrested and was charged with annoying phone calls and, a hate crime and making a criminal threat against the Islamic Center of Southern California. Kamala Harris made a huge deal about it with the Los Angeles Police Department. It was a national story, and they confiscated his guns and put them on display, and they accused him of trying to commit a Columbine-style attack, right? And they portrayed him as this potential mass murderer, hateful bigot. So, this guy, his life has been just living hell throughout the past year, and he's had to go to numerous court dates and has been given plea deals. And, I did an investigation into his case, and new evidence shows that he wasn't the individual who made this threatening phone call to the Islamic Center, despite the fact that he was charged for it. The phone records reveal that the individual who made the phone call is Michael Slauson, who is the son of a democratically appointed Los Angeles Superior Court judge by the name of John Slauson. Mm-hmm. So you have this huge conflict of interest here, and this really kind of sketchy, nepotistic, what looks to be like a cover-up of a crime of a public official's son, right? Mm-hmm. So
I'm not sure how much of a crime it was based on what I saw described in the video, but
they're charging a Trump supporter for it, right? A hate crime.
Mm-hmm.
I use the word crime because that's what they're calling it. They're calling it a hate crime because there was a 56-second long voicemail that was left for this Islamic Center that had supposedly threats and hateful language, and the LAPD and Kamala Harris have chosen to label it as a hate crime. Regardless of what they call it, they're calling it a crime, and someone was charged for it, right?
I know. I'm just comparing it to the scenes I see in Berkeley of things that are not considered hate crimes.
Yeah, and this man, his life has been turned upside down, and they had testimony from an employee of the Islamic Center of Southern California who said that the person who made a phone call on the 19th was the same person who made a phone call on the 20th, because there were two phone calls. One of them is directly traceable to Michael Slauson's number. The other one was used from some type of VPN software, right? Mm-hmm. And this employee said the person who made the call on the 19th made the call on the 20th. And that was the basis that Kamala Harris and the Islamic Center had for charging Fagan, but phone records show that Slauson made the call. So by the Islamic Center employee's statement, one would conclude that Slauson also made the other call, since he said both calls were made by the same person. Yet, there's been no discussion about this in the Los Angeles or California media, despite the fact that they defamed Mark Fagan. They have not held another press conference to announce this other suspect who hasn't been charged or to clear the record. And Kamala Harris is just totally silent.
Right. And she has been... When did she leave the position as Attorney General of California?
Fairly recently, within the past year. But the thing that's more concerning about her is she's obviously being groomed as, a darling for the Democratic Party and, a queen of identity politics, and they're really prepping her for a 2020 run for the White House.
Well, I think you and I have talked about my views on that. I think it's time people start calling her Kamala Harris, given how she is in her position without any exceptional track record in her 20s. She was sleeping with Willie Brown, who was the most powerful man in California politics, while she was in her 20s and he was in his late 50s, and that greased the wheels for her. And I think people need to know this about her. Sorry if that offends you as a woman, but hey, she's Kamala Harris for me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't offend me.
So let me make sure I have this summary right. It's essentially that they charged the wrong guy, ruined his life, as Ann Barnhart's talked about. They will often make people's lives hell, even if they can't ultimately convict someone and put them in jail. They can basically ruin their lives with allegations, which hurts their job prospects, which hurts them with customers, and it costs a fortune to defend oneself. And then after all that, apparently they have the right guy and they're not doing anything, and it's a person who's connected to a Democrat party machine judge. I'm understanding this correctly, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, it appears to be, that appears to be the case, because what you have here is total, like, prosecutorial negligence, right? It looks as if though
more than negligence.
Yeah, but defamation, like a huge scale of defamation. And then also, too, it doesn't really appear that the LAPD looked at any evidence of phone records or really did a thorough investigation before they arrested him. Mark was arrested on October 19th. That was a whole entire month after the first phone call was made. And there's no evidence of him ever making a phone call to the Islamic Center. So what grounds did they have for arresting Mark, besides the fact that if you watch the video, you'll see that he made a couple inflammatory Facebook posts on their Facebook page.
Which he's allowed to do.
Yeah, that's free speech. You're allowed to criticize a religion, and you're allowed to post things as long as you're not, making death threats, which he never made any death threats.
Right.
So, and of course, Mark then admitted to making this phone call because the police told him they had his voice on a recording. So he said, "Well, if you have my voice, then it must be my voice, since I'm the only one who makes phone calls from my call." You have to watch the video to really understand it, because it's so complex, and you have to really get all the details to understand the situation. So in a way, he was kind of coerced or kind of tricked into admitting he made a call that he didn't make, because
so he never called them.
Yeah, but the LAPD told him, "Oh, we have your recording on a voicemail. We have your voice," but it was never him.
See, often it's just not a good idea to talk to the police, and
right.
Let them bring the charges, and they can get admissions that way. I mean, maybe that's my law school background talking, but there's no real reason ever to talk to the police. Frankly, there's no real reason to go on a Facebook page of an Islamic Center too, but I'm sure he's realized that by now. Frankly, I don't think there's any real reason to have any sort of interaction with Muslims, but that's just me. There have been a lot of unfriending on Facebook of one-time friends, and I don't miss them too much. I don't care. And a lot of them are good people. I don't care. It's not worth the trouble. But I digress. So, Kamala Harris here. How do you assess her role? Was she playing the political game? Is it maybe more behind the scenes? We want to make an example of this guy. Was she protecting?
Well, if you're asking me, yeah, I mean, look, it appears as though Mark Fagan was the perfect political target. He was a gun owner, a Trump supporter during a presidential election when people wanted to create narratives of Islamophobia. Kamala Harris at the time was the Attorney General, right? Mm-hmm. And she oversaw this case, and was majorly involved, because this was a huge national story and got a lot of attention in the California media. So Kamala Harris sends Fagan a plea deal, right? And it says, okay, you have to plead guilty to a felony, and these are the requirements in the plea deal. 5 years of formal probation, sensitivity training, community service supervised by MPAC. MPAC is one of these pro-terror organizations that defends terrorists who have faced trial for committing acts of terrorism. So, she's going after a Trump supporter, and then what is his punishment for a crime he didn't commit? Oh yeah, go do community service for terrorists. You have to
sticking his face in it, basically.
An apology letter to the victim, So make an apology letter to the Islamic Center for something you didn't do. Restitution, donations, and denouncing the alt-right and KKK. So she's like insinuating that he's a racist or a member of the KKK when really this guy's half Catholic, half Jewish, and considers himself to be, a scholar on African American history, making him like a less than ideal candidate for the KKK.
Right. I mean, what the hell did the KKK even have to do with this? I mean, it's just the nerve of these people.
And the alt-right also. I mean, this was prior to, everything that we just saw now with the alt-right. But, like, even if he was a member of the alt-right, which he's not, he's a libertarian Trump supporter, why would you ask somebody to denounce a political ideology? I mean, since when is it appropriate for public officials and law enforcement to demand in a legal letter...
It's so not right.
As a form of the prosecution, demand that you denounce a political ideology.
It's amazing. I mean, what country are we living in that they can do this? How someone is not removed from office for even suggesting this is beyond me. I mean, it's so inappropriate. Could you imagine doing that on the other side? Making some black suspect denounce Black Lives Matter? I mean, could you imagine what would happen to the prosecutor? Probably rightfully so if they did that. I'm sorry?
No, I said it's insane. I mean, it just, what kind of world are we living in?
I mean, this is all political, and they wanted to use it. I don't remember them actually milking this for that much during the campaign, but maybe they wanted to have it in reserve. Who knows?
Right.
Speaking of
and then it's so funny, too, like, sending this story around on a side note. Obviously, the media doesn't want to cover this story because, look, the media ran with the story nonstop of this Trump supporter who's an Islamophobe who wanted to murder all these innocent Muslims inside a mosque. Sounds like, your ideal Democratic Hillary Clinton election story, right? But now that all of this new evidence is coming out and it shows that they totally defamed an innocent man, I'm getting replies back from the people who covered the story originally saying, I'll read you one, please get your fake news out of my inbox or learn how to cite sources. And they're claiming that the documents that I've provided are not legitimate documents. So, this is just the left-wing mainstream media that is literally determined to undermine Trump, destroy his base, label all right-wingers as Nazis, Islamophobes, KKK, racists.
That's their agenda.
They just don't really seem like, and we all know this as well, they just don't really have, any desire to correct the record. You would think that somebody would want to correct the record after slamming a person for a crime they didn't even commit.
Why? I mean, look, this is the kind of thing that I'm sure John McCain, if he thought of it, and people like Bob Corker would condemn. I mean, you might even get condemnations for Rex Tillerson and Gary Cohn. I mean, that's what we're dealing with right now. That's the reality.
It's just scary to think because, people don't think. These are the individuals who are planning on runs for 2020. Kamala Harris is definitely looking to run for president in 2020. And people complain about Trump right now. Imagine having a president who would arrest you and claim that they had evidence that they don't even have, right? So lie about evidence that doesn't even exist. Cover for the son of a Democratic politician and accuse you of being a racist and, planning a massacre that you never did. I mean, that's what we're facing. We could potentially have more politicians who just want to label all Trump supporters and conservatives as criminals and destroy our lives, take away our livelihood, and just...
That's the goal.
Incapacitate us.
And Barnhart has been talking about that, and they're using the SPLC and the ADL very effectively for that, labeling people hate. And look, I hope one day we get to say with a smile on our face, payback is a bitch. And I remind people they got to Google the essay "Enemies" by John Walker. That's a worthwhile one for you too, Laura, for people to just be familiar with what we're dealing with here. They're not our political opponents. They're not nice people we can have disagreements with and then go back to having cocktails with. Nah, this is more at stake here, but I think you know that already. All right, Laura. let me tell you've been limited on Twitter, and I mentioned that you work for Rebel Media. What are some of the things you would have been tweeting about if you had been spending more time on Twitter in the last couple weeks?
Well, definitely all of this controversy surrounding Bannon and Gorka leaving the White House, Arpaio being pardoned, which is great news, of course. I love Arpaio. And, of course, this horrible natural disaster that we're seeing in Texas. And, many other issues as well.
Okay.
But
take us through what we may have been missing out on in terms of what you would have been saying on Twitter about Houston, for example, or whatever, or Gorka, or Berkeley this weekend. Just what's on your mind about those things? I want to make sure you have.
Well, I was in D.C. this weekend when news broke of Arpaio getting the pardon, and then right after that, of Gorka resigning. And I think it's a real shame because if you look at the pillars of Trump's campaign, you have issues of radical Islam and terror that Trump put at the forefront and vowed to combat and vowed to make a key part of his administration. But all of the individuals who are necessary or were brought on to actually fulfill those goals are leaving, and it just seems like Trump's cabinet is becoming it's becoming full of these never Trumpers and people who have policies and ideas contrary to what he promised the American people. And then the people like Gorka and Bannon who are most capable to make sure that these policies, these America First policies, were put in place. It's like a total purge. And so, a lot of people, when I was in D.C., were questioning the direction of the presidency. Some people went as far as saying that the presidency is dead. It's a shame to watch, but it just makes you wonder why President Trump is surrounding himself with people like Rex Tillerson, for example, who said that the president speaks for himself, not for us, right? People who continuously put down the president, undermine him, disrespect him, and really just are not loyal to him, right?
And the irony is he's someone who prided himself on demanding so much loyalty. I've never seen anything like this in terms of disloyalty to a president.
Talks about how loyalty is so important. I remember that was such a key aspect. He said, we need more loyalty. Not too long ago, he gave a speech, actually, and said we need more loyalty. And I think that was prior to Priebus leaving. But he talks about loyalty, yet he surrounds himself with all of these unloyal individuals, and then he talks about fighting the globalists and this swamp. Yet his own daughter, who's such a key part of his administration, is partying with George Soros and horrible swamp creatures in the Hamptons.
Wait, whoa, what? I didn't even hear about that.
Oh, yeah, no, Ivanka, I saw this report. You'll have to look it up. We only have a few more minutes left. But look it up. Yeah, Ivanka was in the Hamptons, and supposedly she was partying with Soros and family.
No kidding.
I'll look it up as we're talking now. But
yeah, well, let me. You look it up. I'll say something.
I don't want to give any fake news, disinformation. But,
right. Well, you'll be accused of it anyway, so my standard isn't that high.
No, Ivanka Trump was, swirling champagne glasses in the Hamptons with the worst globalist of them all, right? George Soros.
Was it Soros or Soros family members or people funded by Soros who might even be Republican?
I believe it was Soros.
No.
Yes. Kushner and Ivanka rubbing elbows with Democratic billionaire Soros in the Hamptons. So.
Oh my God.
And Chuck Schumer.
How can you even be at a party with those people? I mean, how can you enjoy yourself? Look, I haven't liked Ivanka and Jared to begin with, and, I thought her conversion to Judaism was fake, and I know that's a sensitive issue for you, so I won't go into the details there. I thought it was bogus, and I know people who make real conversions, don't do the things she does, like so soon. You're not playing golf on Shabbos like she does. I'm so sick of them, look. But Trump puts these people in place. I mean, he has two very capable...
It's so funny that you said that. The first time I actually met Ivanka was at a golf tournament on Shabbos.
Funny. Well, you don't have the same obligations she supposedly has, and we'll leave it at that. but that I do have, for sure. But you know what? I just have to laugh about the Hamptons because, you know, I'm in Northeast Florida, and while I did get a little bit of a rash from going in the ocean, everyone makes such a big deal about the Hamptons and Cape Cod, and I just have to laugh because this time of year, the water is so pleasant here. I would so much rather be in the Daytona Beach or Jacksonville Beach area, and I got a real treat last week when I went to the Gulf of Mexico and went to Clearwater Beach. Just the Hamptons suck compared to Florida. That's my view. It's like, and the people are so much cooler here in terms of like people you'd actually want to be around. You go to a bar and it's pretty conservative. I mean, I couldn't stand. It was fun, you know, like when I was in my mid-20s. I went there one summer, did a share of a place, but just the whole concept of the Hamptons is a joke to me because it's just so quieter at the beach here, and it's so much better. Not that I want liberals coming down here, but I love the beach so much better in Northeast Florida.
Well, you know, you talk about draining the swamp. I mean, an extension of the swamp, the Hamptons. That's where everybody in the swamp goes to vacation, right?
Yeah, and by the way, it probably would be cheaper just to fly to Jacksonville or Orlando Airport and drive to one of the beaches here and just get a place near there. I mean, literally, I think I stayed when I was in Clearwater last week for like under $80 at a perfectly fine motel, like a block from the beach in Clearwater, which is so much nicer this time of year or any time of year than the Hamptons. But anyhow, I kind of have to wind down. Any final thoughts, Laura?
That's it.
All right. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.